Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Anmol. How are you?
I am fine, ma'am. How are you?
I am also good, beta. Yes. Shall I begin with the lesson My Childhood from Beehive?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. My Childhood by APJ Abdul Kalam is the last lesson of the first term syllabus of CBSE, right? The story My Childhood has been written by APJ Abdul Kalam, the name who is very familiar, the name who is favorite among one and all, whether they are children or they are young or they are old, because he is none other than the most favorite 11th President of India, who is fondly known as the Missile Man. Why he is called the Missile Man? Because he contributed to the development of India's missile projects, two missiles, Prithvi and Agni. It is because of his contribution, India became a nuclear power. When he was the chief scientific advisor to the Prime Minister, right? This particular story, My Childhood, is autobiographical. Kalam has written his autobiography in his famous book, Wings of Fire. There are many other books which are very famous, very popular among the readers, Ignited Minds, etc. But this particular excerpt has been taken from the Wings of Fire, right? In this Wings of Fire, and in this particular chapter, the president had completely devoted this very part of Wings of Fire to the description of his childhood. When he has written a number of books and more, then we discover one thing more about him, right? What it is that he was not only a president, he was not only a scientist, he was not only a missile man, but he was also a good writer, an author. He was a very good speaker also. In particular, when he had to interact with the children, he would leave no chance to interact with the children. And he had been such an inspiring and motivating personality that all the people, they would love to be and feel proud to be in the company of President APJ Abdul Kalam. Right? Now, before we start with this, before we start with the chapter, I would like you to see a small video, which is just a brief outline of this lesson. All right? Yes, just a minute.
A lesson for my teacher. I lived on the Mosque Street in Rameshwaram, a city famous for its Shiva temple. Every evening, on my way home from the mosque, I would linger near the temple. I always felt like a stranger here, as the temple goers stared suspiciously at me. They probably wondered what a Muslim boy was doing in front of a temple. The truth was that I loved to listen to the rhythmic chanting of the mantras, though I never understood a word. There was a strange magic in them. Of course, something else led me there. My best friend, Ramanath Shastri, was the son of the head priest. He sat beside his father at this hour, reciting hymns. Ram would steal a smiling glance at me from time to time. At school, Ram and I always sat together on the first bench of our classroom. We were like brothers. However, being a Hindu priest's son, He wore a sacred thread, while my white cap marked me as a Muslim. One day, when we were in the 5th standard, a new teacher came to our class. He looked strict. He went around the class, tapping his cane on his palm, and stopped before us. "You, the one in the white cap, how dare you sit beside the temple priest's son?" he shouted. "Go sit on the last bench." I felt hurt. With tears in my eyes, I picked up my books and shifted to the last row. Ram and I wept together silently after school. We thought we would not be allowed to be friends anymore. When I reached home that day, my father looked at me and asked, "Were you crying? What's wrong, son?" I recounted the whole incident to my father, while Ram also told his family the same story. Early the next morning, Ram came running to our house and said, "Father has asked you to come to our house immediately." I was terrified. I thought I was in for some more trouble. We hurried back to Ram's house. My heart skipped a beat when I saw our new teacher standing there. "In the light of our discussion, apologize to Kalam here," said Ram's father with a stern face. I could not believe what I had just heard. The head priest was asking the teacher to apologize to me. No child is less than another in God's eyes. It is your duty as a teacher to help students live in harmony in spite of the differences in their background. "You can no longer teach in this school," he said. Our teacher immediately asked me to forgive him. He hugged me and said, "I am sorry, Kalam. I have learnt an important lesson in life today." Ram's father saw that the teacher sincerely regretted his behavior and permitted him to continue teaching. From that day on, Ram and I sat together proudly on the front bench. We have remained the best of friends ever since.
So this was a small glimpse of his childhood. And when we had been watching this video, Anmol, what else we learned about Abdul Kalam? That he was a secular person, the one who respected all religions, the one who lived in harmony, wanted to live in harmony. And throughout his life also, he had spread this message. You will be surprised to know that he was a Muslim. He was doing his prayers, that is, he was reading namaz, right, 4 or 5 times in a day. Along with that, early in the morning, he was doing Surya Namaskar also. And you know, when he was in the Rashtrapati Bhavan, what he would do? He would get up very early in the morning so that the other staff, they are not disturbed. He would get up and go for Surya Namaskar, and then he would also do Shiv Upasana. So what a beautiful evidence of the harmony of all religions that is embodied in the great APJ Abdul Kalam. Before we proceed, I would like to share with you a few more things about him. First of all, his name, APJ Abdul Kalam. Of course, it's a big name, difficult for you to read, yet I would tell you, This is Abul Pakir Jainuluddin Abdul Kalam. That was his name, who was an Indian aerospace scientist. He was a missile man. Missile man he became later, but first he was an Indian aerospace scientist, right? From 2002 to 2007, he had been the president of India. He was born on 15th October 1931 in Rameshwaram. Now, Rameshwaram is an island town of Tamil Nadu, right? And he died on 27 July 2015 in Shillong. He had studied physics and aerospace engineering. What he had contributed, there are endless contributions made by the beloved president. He was honored, he was decorated with various prestigious awards. It's a very, very long list. But the most prestigious awards of India that were conferred on him, they were Bharat Ratna, Padma Vibhushan, Padma Bhushan. The man who has been decorated with Bharat Ratna is the biggest and the most prestigious award of India. So what else can we think about it, right? Then there is a movie also, A Little Dream. If ever you get the chance, you must watch this. It is 1 hour's movie on the life of APJ Abdul Kalam. I hope it is clear now.
Yes, ma'am.
Now let us see what APJ Abdul Kalam has shared about his childhood with us. As in the video also you had seen, he said, I was born into a middle-class Tamil family in the island town of Rameshwaram in the erstwhile Madras state. Erstwhile Madras state, former Madras state. Madras, what is it Madras known as now? Currently, it is not called Madras. What is it called? This is called Tamil Nadu, right? The present Tamil Nadu that was earlier called Madras. So he was born in Rameshwaram. Rameshwaram is an island town. It is just on the edge of. The southeast of, you can say, Tamil Nadu, very close to Sri Lanka. If you ever try to find out in the map, right? He belonged to a middle-class Tamil family. My father, Jainuluddin, had neither much formal education nor much wealth. His father, Jainuluddin, he had neither much formal education, meaning he was not much educated, and nor much wealth, meaning he was not rich. He was not rich, he was not well off. Despite these disadvantages, he possessed great innate wisdom and a true generosity of spirit. He had these disadvantages. Disadvantages meaning he was neither wealthy, neither rich, nor he was educated. But he had great innate wisdom. Innate wisdom meaning the wisdom that he had naturally, right? You become wise and mature when you go to school, when you go to learn. But without going to school, without getting so much of education, the man had been born naturally very wise and mature, right? So he was born mature and wise, and a true generosity of spirit. True generosity of spirit meaning he was a man of generous spirit, meaning he was a generous man. Generous is the man who is ready to share with others, who is ready to help others, right? Your friend who is going for the exam with you, right? When you two reach the examination hall, what your friend soon discovers, oh my God, I left my pencil box at home. And if she goes back home, she would get late for the examination hall. And how is she going to write with in the examination hall? You have an extra pen, you lend your extra pen to your friend. telling her, don't worry, I have extra pen. You take this. What are you?
Ma'am, I
Yes,
can.
yes, what are you when you are lending your pen to your friend, the one who has lost, one who has left her pencil box at home?
Ma'am, I can share with it my pen if I have extra pencil.
Yes, so you are generous, right? When you are sharing your things with others, you are helping others. You're not only sharing, you are helping your friend. All right. So you are generous. Is that clear? During pandemic, the Gurdwaras and the Sikhs, how they have come out to help the people. What does it express? It expresses their generosity. They are generous people. I hope the meaning of generosity and generous is clear now.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. He had an ideal helpmate in my mother, Ashiyama. What a way to introduce his mother. He did not say that my mother's name was Ashiyama. No. He said he had an ideal helpmate in my mother, Ashiyama. Father had been fortunate enough to have a helpmate who was always helping her. That was his mother, named Ashiyama. I do not recall, I do not remember the exact number of people she fed every day. But I'm quite certain that far more outsiders ate with us than all the members of our own family put together. Father was not only generous, but this also exemplifies what? That the mother was also equally generous. How? He says, I do not remember exact number of people, how many people mother had been feeding every day. It means that the mother Ashiyama was also so generous that whoever had been visiting their home, she would feed, she would serve them food. So that is the family of generosity, the family of generous people. But he says, I'm sure that far more outsiders ate with us. That is the number of the outsiders whom the mother had been serving food, their number was more than the members of their whole family. It was a big joint family. Despite that big number of the family members, he says many more people would come to their house. And the mother had been serving food to everyone she had been feeding every day. All right. Now, do remember, Anmol, there can be short questions or MCQ kind of questions, right? Where you can be asked, this example can be given, and you can be asked to tell what does it describe about his mother. So you would say generosity or generous. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, similarly, you can be given a question. Father had not been educated, he was not wealthy, yet he had been wise. How did he attain this wisdom? You would say naturally. Naturally, right? It is not necessary you would get the same word to put in. No. You will be given the suggestive words to put in. All right? I hope this passage is clear to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I was one of many children, a short boy with rather undistinguished looks, born to tall and handsome parents. Now you see that how he has described his parents, how he has described the generosity of his both the parents, how he had described that the father was not much educated nor rich, but very wise. Now what else? He says, I was one of many children. That means he had many siblings, right? And this boy, APJ Abdul Kalam, he was a short boy, but his parents were tall and handsome. He was a short boy with a rather undistinguished looks. Undistinguished means very ordinary looks. He was looking very ordinary person. Yes, you know that when he became president that time also, he used to look very ordinary person. And I have seen that as long as he had been the president also, When he became the president, he had been wearing only one blue shirt and pant, we remember. And throughout the time, I had always seen him in that blue shirt and pant. So that suggests what? His simplicity, how ordinary he used to feel. He never thought that he was the president of India. And this very instinct he had right from the childhood. In the childhood also, he used to look very ordinary person. We lived in our ancestral house. Ancestral house, the house which belonged to your ancestors, meaning your grandparents or great grandparents, right? So the whole family was living in the house which was owned by or which belonged to their grandparents or the great grandparents, which was built in the middle of 19th century. In 1931, he was born, and the house they were living in, that was built in the middle of 19th century. So it means that it was quite an old building, right? It was a fairly large pakka house. Though it was an old building, but it was a huge pakka house with bricks and concrete. How? Made of limestone and brick on the Mosque Street in Rameshwaram. His house was situated on the Mosque Street in Rameshwaram. In the video, right, the very first scene you might have seen, right? My austere father used to avoid all inessential comforts and luxuries. My austere father, austere meaning very simple man. Father who was very simple, but he was very firm, right? He was simple but firm, a man of convictions, a man of principles, right? He was a very simple man. He would not use comforts and luxuries. Inessential comforts meaning the comforts which were not necessary. He would not use them. He would not live a luxurious life. They could not live a luxurious and comfortable life actually because father was not very wealthy. I hope this sentence is clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. However, all necessities were provided for in terms of food, medicine, or clothes. Though the father never wanted to use luxuries and comforts, but he would make it sure that all the things which are the necessities, basic necessities of the life are provided to the family. So he took care that the family members, they are getting food, medicine, or clothes. These are the basic necessities. So the family was never devoid of these basic necessities. In fact, I would say mine was a very secure childhood, both materially and emotionally. How simple Kalam was right from his early childhood. He didn't have comforts in the house. He didn't have luxuries in the house. Yet he felt that his childhood was very secure. Why? Because he was blessed with the caring parents. He was blessed with all the necessities which were needed to live, right? So he said, that is what he said, mine was a secure child, both materially and emotionally. Both materially meaning all the necessities were provided to him. He was getting food, medicines, clothes, education also, right? And these are material things that when we live, we need. So he was getting that. And how emotionally his childhood was secure? Emotionally, because he was being cared by both his parents, right? He was blessed with both the caring parents. So that's how his childhood was materially and emotionally secure. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Now again, there can be a question that how does he think that his childhood was secure? The answer would be he thought his childhood was materially and emotionally secure. This is one. Another question there could be, what does he mean by materially and emotionally secure childhood? So then you will explain materially secure meanings All the basic necessities of the life, that is food, medicines, clothes, education, were provided to him. An emotionally secure childhood, meaning that he was given complete care by his both the parents. Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let's go to the next. Now, the Second World War broke out in 1939 when I was 8 years old. In 1931, he was born. In 1939, the Second World War broke out, meaning it started. Second World War started in 1939, and at that time, Kalam was just 8 years old. For reasons I have never been able to understand, a sudden demand for tamarind seeds erupted in the market. That was the time, all of a sudden, he realized what? That the demand for the tamarind seeds, it has increased. Erupted in the market, it has increased. It has risen in the market. Tamarind, do you know what is tamarind?
Yes, ma'am.
What is that?
Ma'am, haldi.
No. Haldi is mustard.
Turmeric sauce.
Tamarind खाते हो आप खूब वो लिख कर करके चस्के लगा लगा के सोचो.
Imli.
Imli, right? Okay, this is Imli, right? Yes, in that part of the country they have a lot of tamarind. Okay, so what he did, he said, I don't know the reason, but all of a sudden the demand for tamarind seeds, जो इमली के बीज हैं, उनकी डिमांड जो है मार्केट में बढ़ गई. I used to collect the seeds and sell them to a provision shop on Mosque Street. What he would do, he would collect the seeds and then he would take the seeds to a provision shop. Provision shop is like a grocery store, right? आपके भी घरों के आसपास कोई स्टोर होगा ना जहां से आप डेली का सामान ग्रोसरीज खरीदते हैं, right? That is called provision shop or provision store. He would collect the seeds and he would sell them in that shop, the shop that was situated on Mosque Street. A day's collection would fetch me the princely sum of 1 anna. Now, anna was in ancient times, in old times, anna was an old Indian currency, an old Indian coin, right? Its value was 6 paisa. Fine. So he says that when he would collect that in a day, whatever he had collected, he would sell it to that provision shop and it would fetch him, it would get him the princely, that is a generous amount, a great amount, a handsome amount of 1 anna. He was happy with that 1 anna. My brother-in-law Jalaluddin would tell me stories about the war, which I would later attempt to trace in the headlines in Dinamani. Now, Kalam's brother-in-law, Jalaluddin, he would tell him the stories about the war. The war had broken out, the war had started. He would tell him the stories, the news about the war. And what Kalam would do then, he would later try to trace, to find those very news details in the headlines in Dinamani. Dinamani was the local newspaper of Rameshwaram, right? He would read the headlines of Dinamani and he would try to find out the details about the news or the news stories that his brother-in-law would share with him. Meaning that his curiosity, you see, at such a young age, he was just 8, and how curious he was about everything that was related to the country. Our area being isolated was completely unaffected by the war. Our area, that is the place, Mosque Street in Rameshwaram, where they were staying. In fact, Rameshwaram itself was isolated. Isolated because it was to the extreme south of India. Tamil Nadu is to the extreme south, right? So it was not affected by the war when the Second World War broke out. But soon India was forced to join the Allied forces. But India was compelled to join the Allied forces. Allied forces are when the armies of different countries, they combine and make one, they make one force. That is called allied forces. So these allied forces comprised of the armies of UK, US, Russia, etc. during the Second World War. India also joined it. India also became the part of this allied forces. And something like a state of emergency was declared because the Second World War had broken out. So an emergency kind of situation was declared in the country. Emergency kind of situation is when our rights and freedoms are curtailed for some time. Otherwise, जो हम freedoms enjoy करते हैं, rights enjoy करते हैं, वो सारी freedoms हमारी जो है थोड़ी देर के लिए temporarily बंद कर दी जाती हैं. That is for safety and security of the country. I hope it is clear.
Yes, ma'am.
The first casualty came in the form of the suspension of the train halt at Rameshwaram station. The first casualty came. Casualty is actually when an accident is happening. Casualty is when a problem is happening. So as such, no accident had happened, but it was the sign of the war. This is what happens in a warlike situation when some trains, they are cancelled, they are suspended for security reasons, right? So the train that used to halt, meaning that used to stop at Rameshwaram station, that train was suspended. That train was suspended, meaning the stoppage of that train at Rameshwaram was cancelled. उसको सस्पेंड कर दिया था कि वो ट्रेन जब रन करेगी तो रामेश्वरम पे नहीं रुकेगी. Is that clear? The newspapers now had to be bundled and thrown out from the moving train on the Rameshwaram road between Rameshwaram and Dhanuskodi. Now try to understand how this suspension of the train halt was going to affect Abdul Kalam. What he was getting, he had been collecting the newspapers. He had been helping his brother-in-law in collecting the newspapers from the station. Right? Now look at this. The newspapers now had to be bundled and thrown out from the moving train on the Rameshwaram route. When the train used to halt at the Rameshwaram station, then the newspaper bundles, they were kept on the station, and then the newspaper vendors, they would collect the newspapers from the station. But now, since the train was not going to stop at the station, so when it would cross the station, the bundles of the newspapers were thrown out of the moving train on the Rameshwaram road, the road that was there between Rameshwaram and Dhanuskodi, another place. That forced my cousin Samsudin, who distributed newspapers in Rameshwaram, to look for a helping hand to catch the bundles, and as if naturally, I filled the slot. Kalam's cousin Samsudin, he had been distributing newspapers in Rameshwaram. He was a newspaper vendor. आपके घर में भी मॉर्निंग में आता है ना न्यूज़पेपर वाला न्यूज़पेपर देने के लिए?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. What is that called? That is called newspaper vendor, right? So Samsudin, he was a newspaper vendor who had been collecting and distributing, delivering, also a delivery boy, right? Delivering the newspapers to the people in Rameshwaram. Now what happened? Since the train had not been stopping, so from the moving train, the bundles were thrown. So Samsudin, he needed someone to help him from, right? Then Kalam had offered himself to help him, as if naturally I filled the slot. So again, this shows his generosity, Kalam's generosity. Till now, you learnt about the generosity of his parents. Now, here is an example how he was also generous. He offered himself, and I felt the slot meaning he helped him by catching those bundles from the Rameshwaram road when they were thrown from the moving train. Samsudin helped me earn my first wages. He was catching his bundles, he was taking those bundles to him, and in return, Samsudin would give him some money, some wages. So in this way, his first wage. Wage kya hoti hai? Do you know what is wage?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, rupees, daily basis rupees.
Right. जिसको हम हिंदी में मजदूरी कहते हैं, है ना? Perks that you earn, the salary, the money that you earn, right? So that was his first wage he earned. Half a century later, I can still feel the surge of pride in earning my own money for the first time. Half a century later, many years gone, and he said still, whenever he remembers that how for the first time he had earned money by helping Samsudin, he gets a sense of the feeling of proud. He feels proud that he had earned himself. That gives him a lot of satisfaction, happiness, and it gives him a feeling of pride. Is that clear? So this is how he was a self-reliant man. Every child is born with some inherited characteristics into a specific socio-economic and emotional environment and trained in certain ways by figures of authority. Try to understand it. It applies to all the children. He says every child is born with some inherited characteristics. Man is not born with all the characteristics. The man inherits. You also might be having some such qualities, some such traits, Anmol, which you have inherited, which you have been given to you naturally by your parents. Right? You see that this is something which you have not been taught, which you have not been taught in the school, which you have not been taught by the parents. But being in that environment, you learn. Right? Just as for example, maybe I'm just giving an example, not necessarily the same. I'm just giving an example. Like for example, your parents are praying in the morning. You grow up seeing your parents doing the same. Your parents are not telling you that you also do the same, but gradually you start doing the same. So this is how the characteristics you inherit from your parents, right? On some particular occasions, you have to go to mandir. Why? Your parents are going, you have seen them. So this is what this faith in one particular religion that you have inherited from your parents. I hope you understand this inheritance.
Yes, ma'am.
Right? How we inherit these characteristics into a specific socio-economic environment. In a particular environment that we have around us. Social environment. Social environment where we live with our family and the neighbors, your friends, your schoolmates, your classmates, all of them, they make up and they give you an environment. So lot many characteristics you inherit from your family, from your parents, you inherit from your social environment, that is from your society. Lot many characteristics you inherit from your economic background, from your economic environment. How it is? If you are wealthy enough, maybe you will not care for the money. But if you are not, when you see your parents, how they are working hard to earn money, then you are very careful in spending. You are very careful in asking your parents for the money at times, right? And emotional environment. The environment which is given to you by your parents, by their love and care. If you are getting love and care by the parents, definitely you are growing healthily. right? If you are not given attention by the parents, then of course that will impact your life. Is that clear? So this is what he means to say that every child is born in a social, economic, and emotional environment. And from that environment, every child inherits some characteristics. And in this way, every child is trained in certain ways. But apart from that, every child is trained, taught in different ways by figures of authority. Now, who are the figures of authority in your life?
Ma'am, what is the meaning of figures of authority?
Figures of authority meaning those who have the right to tell you. They have the right as well as their duty to tell you.
Ma'am, parents.
Right, exactly. The parents are the figures of authority. Your parents, they train you in certain ways by teaching you values. I told you, that there is no formal education for that. But how do you learn? By looking at them, by following them. Isn't it? Right in the beginning, in the primary years of your life, they might have told you to follow certain things. You follow. By now, what it is, you have got used to. You have got used to. So there are a number of the things, right? You see your parents respecting your neighbors, you also being very respectful to your neighbors. They have not taught you, but you have seen them doing it and then you inherited this from them. I hope it is clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, he said, I inherited honesty and self-discipline from my father. He said, my father, he had been very honest and self-disciplined. And I inherited honesty and being self-disciplined from my father. Yes, definitely, Kalam had been a very disciplined man. From my mother, I inherited faith in goodness and deep kindness. And so did my 3 brothers and sisters. He said he and his siblings, his brothers and sisters, they had inherited faith in goodness, belief. They believe in doing good and being kind to others. This quality they have inherited from their mother. It is but natural. The mother who does not send anyone back being hungry, who serves food to everyone who visits her house, we can understand how good and kind the woman must be. So this is what he had seen his mother doing it, right? And he had inherited the qualities of goodness and kindness from his mother. And he had inherited the qualities of honesty and self-discipline from his father. These are very important points. There can be questions on it, okay? I had 3 close friends in my childhood. You're already seen in the video. Ramanatha Shastri, Aravindan, and Shiva Prakashan. With the names, you can easily make out that a Muslim boy had all the Hindu friends. A Muslim boy had all the Hindu friends. Or we say all these Hindu boys, they had a Muslim friend. Is there any difference? Is there any difference when I say that a Muslim boy had all the Hindu friends, or all the Hindus have a Muslim boyfriend? Is there any difference?
Ma'am, Abdul Kalam ji is a Muslim and they are all the best friends of the Abdul Kalam ji all are Hindus.
Yes, so there is no difference, right? There is no difference. A Muslim boy had Hindu friends, or Hindu friends had a Muslim boy. Hindu boys, they had a Muslim friend. There is no difference, isn't it? You just imagine it was in early 20th century, right? When the people had been living in harmony. And today when I see around, I read the messages on social media, oh my God, it is so painful. It is so painful. We are all humans. So what if we belong to different religions, but we are all one? If we live in harmony, the life would be a beautiful life, and this land would be a beautiful place to live, right? Anyway, so now he is talking about his friends. Till now, he had talked about his family, right? Now he is talking about his friends. That is Ramananda Shastri, Aravindam, and Shiva Prakash. All these boys were from Orthodox Hindu Brahmin families. Orthodox, old, traditional, right? All these three boys, they were from Hindu Brahmin families. You see, otherwise, today's Brahmins, they do not like to mingle themselves with Muslims. Very sorry state, very sad to discuss all this. But you see that it was early 20th century. That time also, Brahmins, they would not be indifferent to the Muslims. That's why they were old, conservative, narrow-minded people, yet all the three boys, they had befriended Kalam, who was a Muslim. As children, none of us ever felt any difference amongst ourselves because of our religious differences and upbringing. He says in their childhood, they never felt any difference. The religion had never obstructed in their friendship. There had been no religious differences. They were only friends. There had been no religious differences because of their upbringing. Because of their upbringing, meaning they had been brought up by their parents in such a way who had taught them to respect all the religions and to live in a harmony, to live in unity. I hope upbringing is clear to you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am,
Yes.
ma'am, can we continue whole of the story in next class because I have a tuition?
Today you have a tuition. Okay,
Yes.
let me just conclude this very part. Okay.
Okay.
Right? Because otherwise there would be discontinuity, which I don't want. Right? In fact, Ramanand Shastri was the son of Pakshi Lakshman Shastri, the high priest of Rameshwaram temple. He is just giving an introduction of his friends, right? That how they were staunch Hindu Brahmin families. Ramanand Shastri, he was the son of a high priest of Rameshwaram temple. Later, he took over the priesthood of the Rameshwaram temple from his father. Ramanand Shastri, he was the son of the high priest of Rameshwaram temple, but later on, Ramanand Shastri himself became the high priest of the same temple. Aravindan went into the business of arranging transport for visiting pilgrims. Aravindan, though a Hindu Brahmin, but he had started doing transport business. Basically, he was making arrangements of transport for those very people who were going on pilgrimage. Pilgrimage meaning?
Temples.
Yes, those who were visiting temples, visiting pilgrims meaning those who were, this is what, Hindi में हम कहते हैं ना, जो लोग तीर्थ पे जाते हैं, right? तीर्थ स्थानों पर जाते हैं. Fine. So he had been arranging transport for them. And Shiva Prakashan became a catering contractor for Southern Railways. And Shiva Prakashan, he was working in Southern Railways. He was a catering contractor. He was a contractor who was supplying catering. Catering meaning in the trains, that where in the trains where there is pantry car, food is served.
Yes, ma'am.
Right? Yes. So that is called catering. Catering of the food, catering of the cutlery. So the kind of, in simpler words, you can say that he was a supplier of goods to the Southern Railway. Right? So this is what we learned about his friends. Now, in the next week, we will discuss about his school, his teacher, and many more things. Right?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay,
Good
fine.
evening, ma'am.
It's good evening. You can leave. Hurry up.